All right, let's jump right into a question that's, as old as society itself. How do you find a real leader? This wasn't just some passing thought for the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. It was an obsession. And his search for an answer, well, it's maybe more relevant now than it ever was.
I mean, look around. In a world that so often feels packed with fakes and frauds, how do you even begin to spot the genuine article? Well, believe it or not, more than 2,000 years ago, Plato went on this epic philosophical quest to do just that. And today, we're going to follow along on his journey, step by step.
So, where does Plato even begin? Well, his first attempt was all about pure, cold logic. No messing around. He decided he was going to systematically sift through, get this, all of reality, just to isolate and pin down what a real leader actually is.
And the main tool in his toolbox for this was something called the method of division. Okay, think of it like a cosmic game of 20 questions. You start with a huge, broad category, say all knowledge or all arts, and you just keep splitting it in half, over and over. The idea is to carve reality at its joints, as he put it, until you've basically cornered the one thing you're hunting for.
So, following this method, Plato starts carving up reality. A statesman deals with living things, right? So we start with animals. Okay, split that. We want land animals. Split again. Walking animals. Not the horned ones, so hornless animals. Split again. Two-footed ones, or bipeds. And where does the superlogical path lead us? To a pretty ridiculous spot, actually. It basically says a king is just a herder of the human herd, making him no different than, say, a pig herder.
But here's the thing that makes Plato a genius. He immediately sees the problem with his own logic. He points out, with this great touch of sarcasm, that, hey, if a crane could do this, it would just as logically divide the world into cranes and not cranes. And that's when he realizes his first attempt failed. Why? Because the way we slice and dice reality is often totally arbitrary and, a little self-serving. It's not objective at all.
So his first logical approach, it's a dead end. And this is where Plato does something totally fascinating. He just pivots. He completely shifts gears from pure hardcore logic to storytelling. He tells this grand cosmic myth to basically hit the reset button on the whole search.
Okay, so this myth lays out two different ages of humanity. First, you have the age of Kronos, a kind of golden age where a god was literally the divine shepherd for mankind. Life was easy, spontaneous, everything was provided for. But then there's our age, the age of Zeus. In this era, the gods have kind of stepped back. We're left to fend for ourselves. And our world is one of struggle, sure, but it's also where we get art and science and politics. And this is the key. That old, simple idea of a leader as a shepherd, it just doesn't work for our world.
And just like that, the mistake from his first attempt becomes crystal clear. We are not a flock being looked after by some perfect, divine shepherd. No, our leaders are human, guiding other flawed, messy humans. So the definition of a leader, a statesman, has to fit our reality, this complex, tough world, not some long-lost paradise.
And that realization, that leads Plato to his most challenging, his most provocative idea. And honestly, it's an idea that still kicks up huge arguments today. It's the concept of a ruler who could, potentially, stand above the law.
And here it is, straight from Plato. He says the absolute best thing isn't for laws to rule, but for a person to rule, assuming they have real wisdom and royal power. So why would he say that? He's arguing that an expert's knowledge, their ability to reason in the moment, is just flat out superior to any rigid, written-in-stone law.
To Plato, the law can be like an ignorant and brutal tyrant. It's this rigid, one-size-fits-all thing that just can't handle the sheer complexity of real life. But the wise ruler, they're totally different. They're like a skilled doctor or a ship's captain, right? A good doctor doesn't just blindly follow a textbook. They use their expertise, their art, to treat the specific patient in front of them. Sometimes they have to break the rules to save a life. It's the same for a ruler and the state.
Okay, but this brings up a massive practical problem. I mean, it's a huge what if, and Plato knows it. What if you can't find this perfect, wise, totally incorruptible ruler? What's better? A flawed system of laws that's at least predictable?
or risking it all on finding this one perfect leader who, let's be honest, might not even exist.
And wrestling with that really tough question actually leads Plato away from this idea of a totally lawless ruler. It guides him towards his final and, I think, most beautiful definition of what leadership is. The true statesman's job, it turns out, isn't really about giving orders. It's about a very specific and very delicate craft.
So after this whole long quest, Plato finally lands on his answer. The real statesman is a royal weaver. Yeah, a weaver. Their job isn't to bark commands from on high. It's to skillfully weave together all the different and often clashing threads of human nature to create a strong, balanced, and harmonious society.
So what exactly are these threads he's talking about? Well, Plato says there are two fundamental and opposite types of people. On one side, you've got the courageous types. Think energetic, bold, assertive. They're like the warp in the fabric, the strong, vertical threads that give it strength. But if you leave them on their own, they can tip into violence and aggression. Then on the other side, you have the temperate folks, the calm, orderly, gentle souls. They're the woof, the horizontal threads that weave everything together and bring order. But by themselves, they can be sluggish, passive, and just not get anything done.
So how does this master weaver actually, do the weaving? Well, first, they bind everyone together with shared beliefs about what's right and just. Then, they actively unite these opposite personalities, say through public honors, or even by encouraging marriages between them. And critically, for every important job in the state, they pick leaders who have a bit of both courage and temperance in them. The end goal is to create a social fabric that's smooth, even, and incredibly strong.
And there it is. That's the real answer to Plato's epic quest. After that whole journey from cold logic to cosmic myths, he lands on this really powerful conclusion. True leadership isn't about power or command, it's a creative act. The real statesman is an artist of social harmony.
So we're left with this incredible image, right? A leader as a weaver, someone who doesn't crush dissent but skillfully combines opposing forces to make the whole stronger. But it has to leave us with a final question, especially today. In our own world, which is so often defined by division, what would a leader like that, an artist of harmony, even look like? And maybe the tougher question is, where would we even begin to look for one?